Welcome to this introductory video from LSE Live on how to write essays. Good essay writing is a skill that you need to invest time and effort into in order to get results. This video will take you through the steps to follow for a successful essay and also where you can go in LSE to get more help with your essay writing. Let's look first at the steps you can follow for essay writing success. To make this a little simpler, we have reduced the steps down to 9 essential steps. But as you'll see on the next slides, there is potentially more to it than this. As you can see, there are 9 fundamental steps to essay writing listed here. Get the basics right, question the question, begin to formulate an initial response to that question, conduct research, structure your response, draft the response following your structure, read what you've written, proofread, edit and polish your work up, and finally get feedback. But there is more to it than this. When you reread your work for step 7, you may find yourself unhappy with the first draft or just feeling like you could improve things. In this case, we recommend going back in the process to step 2. Look at the question again and decide which of the steps you may need to repeat. But before we look at that in more detail, let's start with our first step. The basics. What are the basics for any essay or indeed any other type of written assignment you need to produce? It's easy to forget to check the basics, especially when we're under pressure. All of these things we'll look at next are basic parts of the essay writing process, but when we're under stress and pressure to get something written, they are also very easy things to forget. So the basics may include word count. What's your department's policy? Are they very strict on word counts? Do they allow you a certain amount of leeway over or under the word count? Do they include references and reference lists in that word count? Are you allowed an appendix, and does this count towards the word count? Citations. What's your department's expectations on citations? Do they prefer an in-text style with brackets where you generally provide the author's surname and date, or do they like footnotes numbered at the bottom of the page? Does your department recommend you use a specific style, maybe Chicago or APA for example, or are they more relaxed and just ask you to be consistent? Similarly, with your references, what's your department's expectations? Do they expect just a reference list of everything you've cited, or do they prefer a bibliography which includes everything you read, not just what you cited? How do they want this laid out, and in what style? Do you know if there are any other specific requirements in your department? Is everything submitted anonymously with just your student ID number, for example? And importantly, are you producing work for a module outside your department? If so, then do you know if they have different expectations on word count, citations, referencing, etc.? And lastly, are you absolutely certain of when the deadline is and what your department's policy is? i.e., is it that day at 9 AM, that day by midday, that day by 5 PM? How do they expect you to submit? Are you submitting via Turnitin, for example, the university's plagiarism checking system? Or are you uploading to Moodle, the university's virtual learning environment? Or are you simply emailing it? Okay, step 2, the importance of questioning the question. This is about not simply accepting the question at face value or reading it too quickly and presuming you know what it is asking you to do, but instead really taking the time to interrogate and investigate exactly what this question wants you to answer and, significantly, how it wants you to answer. Most essay questions will have instruction terms and content terms, but some will also have limitations. Again, when under pressure, it is easy to gloss over this or just purely focus on the content, but all parts of the question are significant. So we have instruction terms, content terms, and limitations. For each question you are set, and they could all be broken up in this way. Instructions are about how you should answer. Should you discuss, explain, examine, define, etc.? Content is about what you should talk about. For example, the UK leaving the European Union, overpopulation, the banking crisis. Limitations are about your parameters for answering the question, and again are easily glossed over, but are essential for getting the question right. So could it be that they are since 2010, after the ratification of the Treaty of Lisbon, using examples from 3 or more countries? Let's look in a little detail at some instruction terms. Now, there are multiple potential instruction terms out there, but here are 3 that most frequently occur with some broad definitions. Analyze. So when you analyze, you are examining a broad idea or claim and breaking it down into parts, giving in-depth explanations, showing why these parts are important and how they relate or connect to each other. Discuss. For a discuss question, you are investigating something and identifying its significant features from multiple points of view in order to argue your own point of view. You're building a reasoned argument, weighing the merits of an idea, possibly making a case for and against an idea. And evaluate, where you are making an appraisal of the worth of something in the light of its truth or usefulness, and including to some extent your personal opinion or the opinions of others. Crucially, for all these instruction terms, and in fact for every instruction term, you are doing this critically. What does that mean? Well, you are not taking evidence and arguments at face value, but you are interrogating the question fully. You are analysing the language used and programming for ambiguities. You are investigating these arguments, looking at their relative strengths and weaknesses, seeking alternative interpretations where needed, and providing your reader with a critical judgment of the evidence you provide. And you are making explicit any underlying assumptions the author is making. But remember, one of the easiest things to do is to get carried away with your research and writing and not actually answer the question at all. You have to answer the question that has been asked, not what you're interested in writing about. And you have to answer that question in the way that you've been asked to answer it. You cannot change the limitations just because it better suits the argument you want to make. Okay, on to step 3, beginning to formulate a response. Now this may seem strange to place this point here, but what students often forget to take the time to do when they are writing an essay is to sit down and first of all think about what they already know. For example, is this subject totally new to you, or do you already have some background knowledge? Have you chosen this essay topic because you've already done some work on this? Or has there been a lecture that corresponds with this essay, or at least parts of it? How was that lecture? Did you get some good notes? Was it recorded? And can you watch it back? And also, what about your notes from your weekly readings or notes from class? Do you already have notes that will help you answer the essay? It is a good idea at this point to try a very rough mind map, mapping out what you know already and what you initially think your answer may be. Students often skip this step entirely, and this is a mistake. Taking the time to do this helps you on your way to formulating an original response to the question that is crucially based on your arguments and viewpoints and not overly influenced by the arguments of others. To do this, simply, you could start with your question in the center of the page and then include some or all of the following. Some quick notes of key points after reviewing your lecture, seminar and reading notes. Some notes on your initial ideas or potential arguments. Some notes on major interesting ideas of others that you've come across so far. Some notes on your preliminary response. If you had to formulate a rough argument now, what would it be? And then lastly, some notes on potential avenues of research that you will look at next. Okay, step 4, start conducting your research. The library search provided by the LSE library is really an essential place to start. If you've never used library search before, then start doing it now. But where do you start? Well, you could start by just putting in some key content terms into the search bar. But you could also explore the further readings your lecturer recommends. You could look in the bibliographies of some of your key readings and see if there are other interesting reading they mention. And also don't forget, LSE has many databases that are specific to your individual subject area that you'll find here. Don't forget, as you read this material, you are reading critically, looking for evidence that not only supports but also contradicts your position. Good writers don't ignore contradictory positions. Instead, they acknowledge and interrogate them and provide evidence for why they are problematic. And throughout, you are making clear, concise and critical notes on that research. Okay, so where are you now? Well, hopefully you've interrogated the question, began to map what you already know, think an initial response, and conducted some research. So what's next? The next step is to think about the structure of your response. For your structure to work, you need to work with your given word count. To do this, you'll need to allot word counts for the introduction, conclusion, and individual sections of your argument. Why do this? Well, making decisions now about how you'll allot your words will help with further structuring and outlining your response, and should help to prevent your first draft being significantly over or under the allotted word count. There is no rule for dividing a word count up, but there are some general guidelines. A simple way to imagine any piece of writing is to work around the 80%-20% principle. So 80% of the word count given is for the main body of your answer, the points that you'll make, and 20% of the word count is for topping and tailing this with a good introduction and conclusion. There is some flexibility here. So for example, your introduction could be more like 8% and your conclusion more like 12% or vice versa. But generally try to make sure these elements never exceed 20% of the overall word count. So for example, for a classic 2,000 word essay, your introduction would be around 200 words, the main body would be 1,600 words, and the conclusion would be around 200 words as well. Step 6 is to now begin writing that first draft of your answer following a structure. Firstly, you could start by drafting a new mind map. Based on the initial thinking you've done, the research you've conducted, and how many words you have to play with when writing up, what's your potential intro, conclusion, and main ideas? If you have 5, 6, 7 main ideas, do you really have enough words to cover all of these? Or do you need to combine some of these ideas, change them, cut them to make them work with the word count? Then look at those main ideas and think about how you might want to subdivide your 1,600 words. For example, you could have 500 words for the first point, 600 for the second, as it has a little bit more to discuss, and 500 for the third. Then, taking this proposed word count, you could initially draft your response into paragraphs. Now, there is no perfect amount for a paragraph, but somewhere around 200 to 300 words is generally average in academic writing and helps your argument to remain clear and easy to follow. It is a good idea to not only structure your essay as a whole, but also to structure your individual paragraphs. This helps them to keep focused and for you to present the information clearly and concisely. A classic structure for a paragraph is shown here. You open the paragraph with a clear topic sentence that sets out what the argument or point of that paragraph will be. The middle of the paragraph contains your evidence with examples that both support and contrast with your argument. And then the paragraph concludes, wrapping up that point and creating a link or connection to the next idea or point that you'll explore. Let's look at that in more detail. So the first or second sentences are the topic sentences that introduce the point that this paragraph will discuss. You can also here explain or define key or problematic terms if that's needed. In the middle sentences, you do two things. You bring in supporting evidence, which is essential, examples if needed, and alternative viewpoints if they're relevant. But the middle sentences also include discussion and analysis. Yes, you've supported your point, but why is it significant? What are you proving? Then in the last sentences, you provide comments and a conclusion to that paragraph, perhaps by looking at the consequences or implications of your argument. And you carefully move the discussion on and link to the next paragraph. Okay, step 7. Now is the time to read what you've written. After rereading, do you still interpret the question in the same way? Does your initial response still hold? Do the various parts of your argument still make sense? Do you need to do further research? If you do, and most likely you will need to do some revision, then it's time to rinse and repeat. Cycle back through steps 2 to 7. Starting with going back to step 2. So question the question again. Did you misinterpret or just completely miss something first time around? Is there a clue you missed in the way the question is written that directs you to what the marker is looking for? Do you need to modify your approach to the answer? After you've gone back through the steps, your 1600 words might now look more like this. Perhaps now you're thinking 400 for the first point, 750 for the second, and 450 for the third. Okay, we're nearly there. Let's look at step 8, proofreading, editing, and polishing your work. Firstly, it is important to recognise that you will not be effective at this step if you don't take a break first. Ideally, 1 or 2 days will help you to clear your head and look at your writing with fresh eyes. But even if it's only for half an hour because the deadline is looming, you must take a pause between finishing your draft and trying to go straight into polishing it up. Don't worry too much about being over the word count until you have done at least a few proofreads through. Ideally, proofreads result in cutting information, not adding, so you may already find your word count going down. So looking at editing the text first, perhaps, do all the paragraphs have topic sentences? Does the paragraph stay focused on one topic? Do they flow nicely from one argument to another? Does the conclusion conclude the actual argument? Does the introduction outline the argument that actually follows, or what you thought you would argue 3 weeks before? Don't forget to read sections aloud. This can really help when editing to more clearly recognise when something isn't quite working. For a language proofread, is the punctuation and grammar correct? Have you used your commas correctly? Have you remembered all your full stops? Have you opened and closed quotations? Does the subject and the verb of the sentence agree? Have you done a few spell checks and checked the results? Are your sentences going on for more than 3 lines? If so, they really should be shorter for clarity. Read them back through and see if there's anything that you need to change. Is the same happening with your paragraphs? Are they significantly over 300 words so your reader loses or gets bored of the argument you are making? Again, is there something that you could change here? And have you checked your references? Have you been consistent in your style? Have you always included a citation when something is not your idea? Have you missed anything from the bibliography or reference list? Okay, step 9, getting some feedback. The best writers read their feedback through thoroughly, not just focus on the grade. They seek clarification on anything that they are unclear about, and they create an action plan to respond to that feedback for their next piece of writing. They also crucially make use of office hours and or their academic mentor to discuss their writing. The more you do these 4 feedback steps, the more you will see your writing improve. So remember, essays require planning, and there are some steps you can follow to help this process. But also, academic writing is a skill. It takes practice, but there's a lot of support available. So where can I go to get more help? Well, LSE Life is here to help you throughout your studies at LSE. We support students with all aspects of their academic, personal and professional development, and across the academic year we offer one-to-one support tailored to you, as well as workshops and webinars on multiple topics that will help you succeed as a student. To find out more, go to our webpage and sign up for our weekly email updates. Then you'll be the first to know about our upcoming webinars, workshops and one-to-one sessions, as well as new digital resources to help you with your studies. But that's not all. If you're watching this, chances are you've come across this via our Moodle page. But if you haven't, now is the perfect time to log into Moodle and look for LSE Life in your course list, or search for us and join up. You'll find multiple useful videos, slides and worksheets, and much more on all aspects of studying at LSE that will help you throughout your time here. So do make use of this valuable resource. Okay, that's the end of this video. Thanks for watching, and we hope you found it helpful.